In this lesson, we'll export our model to Google Earth. All right, so now what I'd like to do is take the time to take this work here, now that we've taken care of the detail and focus in on our site, and let's focus in on the context. So that means we're going to jump back into our Google Earth. So what we need to do is we need to export this out with a new name, including site information, something that's easy to remember, easy to find, and we're going to bring this into Google Earth, and then we're going to make a slight adjustments to its elevation so that we could see our water feature from the views that we're getting ready to set. So let's get it started. When we do this, I'm going to show you something that kind of happens as you're working. So if you remember, we first tested out our conceptual mass in Google Earth, and it actually worked out nicely. But so a lot of times when you're working, little things can happen that can kind of break things along the way. And we've added so many elements and done some painting. We've definitely oriented our faces in the right direction. But what we need to do is go ahead and add some paint to this surface. And I'll show you why. So let's go ahead and export this first. We'll see the problem, and then I'll show you the solution. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to export this out. We'll say export 3D model. I'll do this to my desktop, and I'm going to call this Form A Concept. Go ahead and export that. And then we'll go back to Google Earth. And now I'm going to go to add, like we've been doing, and we're going to add our model. So I'm going to say Form A Concept. And then we'll go ahead and browse and locate that particular model here. Should be somewhere right over here. Then you'll notice something as I zoom in here. It looks like a lot of our building is gone. It looks like only our glass panels are in place. So if I hit OK here, and that's exactly the problem we're having. Everything else is showing up except our mass. And after all, this is a conceptual massing study in a conceptual site plan scenario. So that's some very important information that we don't want to miss out. So if you ever want to delete this model, in this case we're going to do that, and we'll bring it back in after we make the necessary adjustments. Just go to Edit, Delete, and it'll get rid of the last thing you did. So we'll delete Form Concept. And you could even come over here and click on the model name, right click, and you can delete it from there as well. So let's go ahead and jump back to SKETCHUP. So now what I want to do is I want to pick a color, white preferably, and I'm going to assign it to each one of these components here. After all, we have 1, 2, 3 separate components. The middle here is a copy of all these pieces. So it's bottom, middle, top. So let's go ahead and apply that. So I'm going to grab my paint bucket. Let's pick a paint really quick. So we'll go to colors named, and I'm going to go with a white color. So this 128 white. But I'm going to go ahead and start from the top here. Double click on this first one, double click it again, select everything, and when you do it, the other side should be selected as well. Go ahead and grab your paint bucket and just drop that paint on there. Now you'll notice that your windows get painted. Don't worry about it. We'll actually come back after the fact and add some translucent color. But for now, it's all about making sure we apply our color that's going to appear when we're trying to get this on the internet and Google Earth. So, okay, now we'll double click on this area here again. Click, highlight. It'll get that entire middle section as I mentioned. Grab your paint, drop your paint, and we're good. So let's do the same thing to the very bottom over here. Double click the bottom, double click again, highlight. It should get this side. Grab your paint, drop your paint, and we're good. So while we're here, let's go ahead and grab our translucent color. So we're going to say translucent blue. And I'm going to kind of click out the way so I don't paint the entire thing here. But we just want to paint these panels. So go ahead and grab your paint, translucent, and drop your paint into the panels here, these glass panels. Now for the bottom and the very top, it's going to take care of just the bottom, but it'll take care of it on its opposite side here because it is a copy. Now when we come to the middle here, go back in here and double click again, highlight everything. It'll take care of the entire middle section because the entire middle section, as I mentioned, is a copy of just this one piece. Grab your paint bucket. Actually, we don't want to paint the entire thing. We just want to paint the glass. So grab your glass, translucent, and just paint in your panels. And you can see how it automatically takes care of the entire middle portion of our mass here. Perfect. So last but not least, let's go ahead and take care of the top as well. So go ahead and click out, double click, and let's grab our paint bucket, and let's just paint in our glass for our top level. So it just takes a few extra steps, a couple extra minutes. If you ever run into that issue, we actually ran into it in our particular project here, but sometimes you run into it, sometimes you don't. But that's the solution. Just go back in, make sure your faces are oriented in the right direction, and also maybe you need to apply paint to make it more visible. So now we can say File, let's go ahead and export this, and I'm going to export this over the Form Concept A again. We'll export, say yes. Jump back to Google Earth, and then we'll add the model like we've been doing. This time I'm going to go ahead and make sure I got my name in, Form A Concept. Browse will locate it, just right here on my desktop. It will bring in my model, and immediately you could see I'm starting to see more of my building elements, but you won't see the rest until I hit OK. So for now, I'm going to move this window, and I'm going to get our model placed. So once we see that finger, let's go ahead and bring it up here, place it in the middle. Let's do a quick rotate, and it's going to be really the key here is to line up our corners. Remember, we took a little bit of extra time to go ahead and take those extra crucial measurements. So now I have that set in place. So now I'm just going to grab this guy, and I'm going to line up the corners here the best that I can. And I could probably need to do a small additional rotation here to get this to fit nicely. So I want you to pay attention to something else here. You'll notice my water's disappeared. Not a problem at all, because now we can actually use this elevation tool I mentioned to you once before. So we go to this altitude. So right now it's set to clamp the ground. We want it to be relative to the ground. This will allow us to actually do this and just give it a little up kick, just a little bit. Bring it up to about 2 meters. It'll expose our water here. I'll say OK, and now when we zoom around in all our views, we can get a much better view of our site. So there we go. We've created and sculpted our site model along with our conceptual mass and kind of massaged it to fit our site, and we brought it into Google Earth. So now we have a better idea of what our design is going to look like in the context of this entire area. Such a helpful tool. So as I mentioned before, there's a couple of layers we can play with. If you feel like this proposed site gets in the way, just come up here and deselect it here in your places, and it'll get rid of that. And if you feel like maybe 3D buildings, you don't want to use them, you can actually come in here and deselect, and then what it'll do is it'll generate this flat image, and it'll actually create this effect that allows your building to just pop a little bit better. And you can get a good understanding of what you need. You still get all the information, all your infrastructure, your street, your roads, your geography. You can get a good idea of what's going on. But I think the 3D buildings can be helpful as well. They create a really unique looking view to kind of tell the story about your concept as well. So that's how you basically model and bring it into SKETCHUP. So in the next lesson, I'm going to show you what we can do in case a client changes their mind after we've gone through this whole process. And really, it's all based on how you model your concept and the communication you have with your client. So in the next lesson, we'll do a quick little exercise on creating iterations for this design.